My fiancée betrayed me during my bachelor party, so I didn't show up to the wedding and left her alone to explain to the guests the reason for the absence of the groom's family and the groom himself. The result was I, at 31 years old, had been engaged to Megan, 30, for over a year. I met her and dated her for 4 years. Today was supposed to be our wedding, but here I am, miles away, ignoring her and writing to strangers in the hope of feeling better. Last week, my friends organized a bachelor trip for me. It was at a countryside retreat. Nothing extravagant, just one last celebration with friends before the wedding. On the day we left for the trip, I felt a strange sensation, as if something wasn't right, but I couldn't explain what it was. She hadn't planned a bachelorette party. Instead, she decided to work over the weekend to make up for the days off after the wedding. I felt guilty about leaving her alone just one weekend before the wedding. I told her I didn't want to go, that I'd rather stay with her. She convinced me that it would be a bad idea for my friends, who had worked so hard to organize everything. At that moment, I thought she was right. Now I know why she sent me away. The trip was fun, far from being some wild men's party or anything like that. My friends rented a cabin by the lake, filled the fridge with beers, and stocked the living room with enough snacks to last a month. Yes, I have friends who eat like 10 people. I'm the first in the group to get married, so everyone was excited. We spent the first night drinking around a bonfire, telling stories, and making crude jokes. It was everything a bachelor weekend should be, but I couldn't shake this nagging feeling of guilt. She was home alone working while I was there, having fun. The next morning, I don't know if it was the hangover or instinct, but that feeling became unbearable. Without saying anything to anyone, I slipped away and drove back home. I wanted to arrive early and prepare dinner for her. It would be a surprise, and maybe we could spend a quiet evening together before the chaos of the wedding preparations. When I arrived, I saw a car parked in front of the house that wasn't hers. Her car was in the garage, as if she had never left for work that day. She was supposed to be at work. What was she doing home in the afternoon? I could have sat there inventing excuses for what was happening, or I could call and ask. I answered with a cheerful voice. "Hi, love. How are things going?" My throat went dry, and I asked, "Well, where are you?" Without hesitation, she replied, "At work. Why?" I responded, "Nothing, just wanted to know how your day is going." She said, "Good, but with a lot of work. I need to finish a lot before my day's off." Before I could react, she hung up, saying she was in the middle of something important, and started bombarding me with loving messages, full of "I love you" and "I miss you." I froze in the car. I didn't enter through the front door. I couldn't. Something inside me, maybe instinct, told me not to do it. Instead, I circled the house to the backyard, where the bedroom window was. The curtains were closed, but the sounds coming from there were clear. It was her, whispering and laughing, and a man's voice joking and talking. I grabbed my phone and pressed record. I didn't know if it would be useful in the future or not. There, amidst the laughter, I heard her say, "I still can't believe I'm doing this here. It's so good. I want another round." The guy laughed and whispered something I couldn't hear. After a few minutes of silence, I heard her moans, which grew louder and louder until I couldn't take it anymore. Hearing those words devastated me. I wanted to burst in, kick the door open, and catch them red-handed, but I couldn't move. It was as if my body was paralyzed. Instead, I sneaked back to the car. I could have gone in and ended everything right then, but I didn't feel the need to confront her. What for? I already knew the truth. I just wanted to disappear and never see her again. Walking in and beating that cheating pair would only land me in jail, while they'd go back to doing the same thing while I was locked up. I drove back to where my friends were. I didn't say a word. I just drank until I passed out, anything to numb the sharp pain in my chest. My friends dragged me to the pool. Subscribe to the channel now. I'd love to know where you're from. It makes me so happy. And let's get into the video. But all I did was drown myself in my own suffering and drink non-stop. The hours passed in a blur until my closest friend, John, pulled me aside and asked what was going on. My friends knew I had left early that morning, but they assumed I went for a run around town or something similar. I told him everything. His face turned red with anger. He was as furious as I was. That's how good friends react. It was truly comforting to have someone who felt the same way I did. We talked for hours. I told him I didn't want this situation to pass without her facing consequences. He threw out some wild revenge ideas, and together we picked one. It was obvious. I didn't want to see her face or confront her. All I wanted was merciless revenge. After checking out of the resort, John drove me back to his place. From there, I sent Megan a message saying I'd be home the next day. She responded casually, "Oh, perfect. Tomorrow I'll go to my parents' house and stay there until the wedding. See you before I leave." I hesitated before replying, "Let's save the excitement for the big day." She accepted without any suspicion. That night, John stopped by my house and noticed the same car was still parked there. She was still playing her damn game, shamelessly and remorselessly, even with her lover that night. The next afternoon, I returned home. She was at work, or God knows where, but the bedroom was so clean that no one would have suspected what had happened there the day before. At least they had the decency to leave it spotless. But even if they had poured 10 liters of bleach in that room, I felt so disgusted I couldn't look at the bed. I slept on the couch for the remaining days before the wedding. I played my part perfectly. Sweet messages, pretending to be excited about the wedding. On the surface, everything seemed fine, but inside, I was completely detached. On the morning of the wedding, she arrived at the venue with her entourage, bridesmaids, makeup, artists, family, posting stories and updates on social media. I told her I was going to pick up my grandmother from the airport and would be a little late. I stayed in touch with her until the last moment, playing my role. But instead of putting on my suit, I packed my things, locked up the house, and drove to my grandmother's house in another state. I turned off my phone, and for the first time in days, I breathed easy. Before disappearing completely, I sent an email to my guest list. My family, close friends, and colleagues. I told them everything about the infidelity, the lies, and how I found out. I informed them the wedding was canceled and asked them not to bother calling me or contacting Megan about it. I left out our mutual friends because I didn't want anyone tipping her off, in case they decided to play double agent. My parents still tried to reach me because they were worried. I gave them a brief explanation but avoided going into details about my plan. Only my grandmother was fully aware. I called her the night before, asking her not to travel for the wedding. John said he'd go to the event, see what happened, and keep me updated. He knows I'm with my grandmother. He called me earlier, but I don't think I'm ready to hear it yet. I feel numb, suffocated. I don't want to talk to anyone. I have so much to say, but I can't write any more right now. I'll make another update soon. Update 1. I spoke with John. He told me everything in detail. The wedding day was absolute chaos. Everything seemed under control until the guests started asking about my family and me, the groom. She tried calling me repeatedly, but when she got no response, she called my parents. With no luck, she also called John, who was there at the venue, and pretended to know nothing. Megan's parents started bombarding her with questions. Where's the groom? Is this some kind of joke? What's going on? Her bridesmaids tried to maintain composure, forcing smiles, but the tension in the air became undeniable. The guests gathered in small groups, speculating, whispering, and creating all kinds of theories. One of them, invented by her maid of honor, was that I had run off with a coworker. Eventually, Megan's father got on stage and tried to calm the situation. "We're experiencing a slight delay. Please be patient." His voice trembled, and he was pale because the wedding was a disaster with no answers. This didn't help at all. The guests weren't stupid. They knew something was terribly wrong. Megan and her friends realized none of my guests had shown up, and it all seemed premeditated. They tried cornering John to get information out of him. But John was a closed book and acted completely surprised. Eventually, Yeli's parents and friends discreetly escorted her out of the venue, and one of her bridesmaids announced that the wedding was postponed and everyone would be notified about the new date. But that wasn't even the worst part. Not only was she facing the emotional disaster of being humiliated in front of her family, friends, and a room full of people. No. This also hit her where it hurt the most, her wallet. Megan had lost a good job a few months before the wedding. After much searching, she landed a poorly paid one, earning just enough to cover her basic expenses. I was the one paying for most of our household costs. At the time, it didn't matter to me. We had already planned everything. And since I had the means, I offered to cover the wedding expenses without hesitation. I believed we were a team, and in a marriage, it didn't matter who paid as long as we were in it together. That belief shattered the day I discovered her infidelity. The moment I ended our relationship, I decided I wouldn't let my money fund a celebration built on lies. For the wedding, we had hired an event planner who took care of everything: the venue, decorations, food. We had only paid 40% up front. The remaining 60% was still pending. In fact, the 40% was supposed to be settled 2 days before the wedding, but conveniently, I delayed it. When the event manager contacted me to remind me about the payment, I told him I'd take care of it. He informed me there would be an additional interest charge for the delay, approximately 30%. I told him it was fine, that we'd pay whatever was necessary, and mentioned he could charge whatever he deemed fair. It wasn't my problem. I knew I'd disappear, and she'd have to deal with it. And that's exactly how it played out. When Megan tried to slip out of the venue quietly to escape the judgment of the guests, the event staff stopped her. The manager wasn't letting her go without settling the debt. 60% of the total wedding cost plus the interest. Trust me, it was an enormous amount, a huge blow for someone without a stable job who had already spent all her savings on the wedding dress, makeup, bridesmaid outfits, and other details. The manager insisted it be paid immediately. She didn't have enough money to cover it at that moment. Her father had to step in, but even for him, the amount was too high to pay all at once. Desperate, he begged for more time, arguing that this had caught everyone by surprise, that the wedding had been canceled, and that no one knew where I was, supposedly the one who should have paid. But the manager wasn't in the mood for excuses. He told her it didn't matter what had happened or who would pay, but someone had to do it or leave some kind of guarantee. After much pleading, they let Megan and her mother go, but forced her father to stay until a new contract was drawn up. They made him sign, assuming full responsibility for the payment if the debt wasn't settled within the agreed time frame. Legal action would follow if they didn't comply. The humiliation of signing those papers in front of some people who were still there, including John, was brutal. He was red with anger, cursing loudly. By then, John had already shown my email to most of the people who had attended and were still at the venue. Almost everyone knew the truth. But Megan's parents still believed I had left her at the altar without reason. After dealing with the event organizer, her father went straight to my parents' house. He was furious and ready to fight, but he was met with a cold reception. My mother looked at him unfazed and told him the truth about his daughter's infidelity. He was embarrassed, but still angry with me over the wedding money. He said I should have informed them so they could have canceled their attendance as well. That I should have handled this privately and not turned my family into a laughingstock. He spoke quite rudely to them. My father didn't stay silent. There's no one to blame here but your daughter. She destroyed everything. Not my son. She chose lust over loyalty. Instead of coming here to lecture me, you should teach your daughter to be faithful to her husband and not sleep around with anyone. He left because there was nothing more to discuss with them at that point. Later, I found out that Megan returned home with her mother and friends, only to find my side of the closet empty. All my things were gone. It was over. I made sure to print and post pictures of her lover's car parked in our driveway. I'm sure her parents and friends didn't take it well. I don't know exactly what happened between them after that, but some mutual friends ended up contacting me. Through them, I found out that even her own parents had turned their backs on her. She had to move out of the house because she couldn't pay the rent. Initially, her parents had planned to take her in until she could get back on her feet, but when they discovered her infidelity, they withdrew all their support. Her father, because of the whole debt issue, was angrier than you could imagine. He demanded she pay him back every last penny he had, covered. Not only was she completely alone to face the consequences of her actions, but now she was also financially ruined. Right now, she's sleeping on a friend's couch. I don't care at all. I've moved in with John for now until I find a place of my own. Much of what I know about her has come from messages she sent me, but I haven't responded to any of them, and I've blocked her. I can't say if there have been new attempts or not. Nothing reaches my phone anymore. Update 2. It's been over 4 months since the wedding that never happened. She's been chasing me, seeking some kind of closure, or so she claimed. Any mutual contacts, we had tried everything, calling me from different numbers, trying to reach me through mutual friends, and even sending letters to my parents' house. Nothing worked. I didn't respond because I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I blocked her everywhere, erased her from my life as if she never existed. But she was relentless. Her last attempt came in the form of an email. The subject line read, "One last meeting to close this. Please, please, please." I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. It was long and desperate, full of pleas, apologies, and a request to see me in person, just once. She promised there would be no drama or manipulation, just a chance to explain herself and find some peace. I didn't feel bad about not responding. Once I deleted it, I decided she didn't deserve closure for this. She didn't deserve anything from me. However, I was once at a cafe enjoying my new life when she found me. I still don't know if it was by chance or if she somehow forced the encounter. It's not like I frequented places far from my workplace. I didn't see her until she was already standing next to my table, all because I was distracted reading my phone. Otherwise, I might have had a chance to escape. At least it gave me some satisfaction to see how terrible, terrible she looked. I thought, to myself, I was going to marry that. I know it's not very nice to think that way, but it felt good to see her suffering. I wanted to get up and leave, but she said she wanted to talk, and she said it a little loudly, so some people started to look. I didn't want to make a scene there, so I stayed seated and told her she had 5 minutes. She told me everything without excuses or attempts to soften things. She started with small talk, but then she swore it wasn't a real betrayal. She swore, up and down, that she had no emotional connection with that guy, that it only happened once, that she had never cheated on me before, and that she only did it because she wanted one last night to explore her fantasies before committing to monogamy forever. She said she didn't want a bachelorette party, just this, an experience that would allow her to get married completely guilt-free or doubt-free. The guy was a former coworker with a reputation for being good in bed. She muttered something about him being experienced. There was a rumor at work that he slept with our boss, and she was so impressed that she gave him a promotion. Not only that, but he had also been satisfying some of the most important executives in the company. Women, of course. They were just rumors, but I had my doubts. She messaged him asking if all that was true, and he hinted that yes, he was very good at his side job, that he didn't do it for money but for pleasure, no strings attached. And that was exactly what she wanted. A night of pure physical pleasure. Something transactional, nothing more. She swore she never intended to repeat it and had planned everything so I wouldn't find out, so it wouldn't hurt me. I sat there feeling disgusted, dirty. She was the one who did all that, something many would consider pretty low, but I was the one who felt that way. I kept talking, though mentally I had already checked out, thinking about everything she probably asked him to do to her. She was saying something when I interrupted her and asked, "What did you ask him to do to you?" She froze. I repeated, "Tell me, what was your fantasy? Tell me in detail. Did you give him instructions beforehand? Did you write it to him in a message? Show me." I didn't realize my voice was rising. She begged me to stop. "I won't say it, for God's sake." She started sobbing. After a minute of silence, she said she had regretted it the moment I called her that day to ask how she was. She claimed she knew that call had ruined everything and that she should have stopped what was happening, but she didn't, and went ahead anyway. From what I heard and recorded that time, she didn't sound very sorry. Another lie. Then came the manipulation. "If you found out, You could have walked in and ended it right there. We hadn't done anything before your call, and I wouldn't have cheated. But you chose the cowardly path of revenge. You toyed with me for a week, just to humiliate me in front of everyone. My parents were humiliated, traumatized. You could have handled this privately. You should have been a man and confronted me instead of running away. And then she made a complete 180-degree turn. Still, I can forgive you if you can forget what happened and start over. We both made mistakes, but those mistakes cancel each other out. I almost laughed. She really said that she was willing to forgive me for what I did to her, that we both made mistakes, and that we should just leave it behind, move on, and maybe start fresh. She whispered, "I still love you. I know you love me too, so it won't be hard to fix this." And then came the cherry on top. She offered to return the 40% I spent on the wedding. "I know you paid 40% up front, and my dad covered the rest. I'll pay him back as soon as I can. If this helps, I can pay you back your 40% too." She said it as if money had been the issue, as if that could erase everything. But getting the money back wasn't a bad idea at that point. So, an idea sparked in me. I told her, "I can't promise you anything because too much has happened between us, but returning the money from the failed wedding could be a good starting point. I knew there'd be no way I'd get that money otherwise. But it would be a good refund after she ruined everything to satisfy her doubts with another guy." We agreed that I'd unblock her so we could coordinate the payment of that 40%. She said it would take her a few weeks, or maybe a little over a month. But she'd get some kind of loan to pay me back as soon as possible. I know it's not good to deceive people, but deceiving someone who deceived you doesn't exactly earn you 100 years of forgiveness either. Still, I didn't commit to going back to her even if she returned the money, so technically I wouldn't be lying. I'll probably check back in a month when I know whether Megan has paid me back or not. Update 3. I won't deny that these last 2 months I've been a bit anxious because I didn't know if Megan would actually pay up or if she'd figure everything out, but she did. So this is a happy update for me. To those who say what I did was wrong and that I should have even paid for the rest of the wedding, well, I can put you in touch with Megan. That way you can be her doormat and wait for her to come home after cheating on you. I'm sure you'd like that kind of thing. But the day finally came for me to receive my payment, which I got through a transfer from Megan to my account. Not a cent was missing. Even the transaction fees were covered, if I upload the receipt. I knew because she messaged me herself to let me know. I asked her how she got the money. I didn't want to be involved in some bank robbery or something, and she told me she had taken out a loan. With that, she also managed to pay her father back. That loan must be super expensive because the bank probably gave it to her at sky-high interest rates. But that's not my problem. My only problem now is deciding how I'm going to use that money in my life. Before I get to the next part, I want to mention that during this time, I received a few messages from her trying to talk about our relationship. I responded with the bare minimum to keep her thinking about returning the money, but not enough to give her false hope. Let's just say my responses were pretty vague. Then came the message I figured she'd eventually send, and that I knew I'd have to respond to sooner or later. In fact, I already had my response ready. I just had to copy and paste it. She asked, "And now, what about us?" My response, which I still have saved, was, "When you said I wasn't a man for not stopping what was happening, I think you were right, but only to a certain extent. A man should fight for his woman, yes, but for one worth fighting for. And in your case, since you wanted to sleep with a guy just because he had a reputation, you weren't worth it. I think now you have a reputation, too. I also think a man should never go back to someone who disrespected him the way you did. So yeah, I'm being a man here, and it's precisely what you'll never have." After that, I blocked her again. Yeah, I know there are plenty of men who don't care if their women cheat on them. They probably even clap when they come home after being with another man. That's why they're now upset that I didn't pay my part of the wedding for canceling it. Well, sorry to hurt your feelings, but I paid to marry a faithful wife, not an unfaithful one. So this is my refund for a defective fiancé. And if you think forgiving and paying was the right thing to do in this situation, you can ask her father what he did with her after she paid him back. Yeah, He didn't forgive her either. No one wants a cheater, unless your self-esteem has moved to another planet. This story raises some very deep questions about trust, respect, and the limits of forgiveness in a relationship. The protagonist was betrayed in a painful way, and his decision to seek justice, or perhaps revenge, reflects the emotional impact the betrayal had on him. On the other hand, the way he handled the situation also raises contradictory debates. Do you agree with the decisions he made, especially regarding the money and completely cutting off contact with Megan? Or do you believe he could have acted differently, seeking a more empathetic or reconciliatory path?